It was the summer of '96 in Spencerville, Ohio. The locals called it the Summer of the 13 Vanished. I was just a kid back then. The '90s were all about massive shopping malls, neon colors, Big League Chew, and those disposable Kodak cameras. It's hard to believe now, but we grew up without the internet in our pockets. My older brother had a Motorola pager clipped to his belt, and in our neighborhood, that made him the man. But that's not what I'm here to tell you about. I want to talk about a videotape, one that still shows up in my nightmares. That eerie sound of the tape rolling, the mechanical whir of the VCR swallowing the cassette into its dark gut. We were on summer break. School let out in June, and our parents were pulling double shifts at the local auto parts plant just to keep us fed. We were 14-year-old punks left to our own devices. We'd spend all day hanging out at abandoned construction sites, wasting quarters at the arcade, or loitering outside 7-Eleven. Then there were the other spots. Those dingy basement shops that sold comics and used VHS tapes, where you could rent a beat-up action flick for a couple of bucks. Those places always smelled like dust and cheap tobacco, and the light barely fought its way through the grime on the windows. But the second a new bootleg tape started rolling, the rest of the world just disappeared. We lived for horror. Hellraiser, A Nightmare on Elm Street. We devoured them by the gallon, ready to do anything for an adrenaline rush. We'd seen Elm Street 1,000 times already. My buddy Chris had his own setup, a used Magnavox 5CR he got for his birthday. His mom was a single parent working double shifts at the diner, so she couldn't spring for a new one. But even a hand-me-down was a total game changer. Whenever she was at work, we'd spend all day glued to his big Sony Trinitron. Some tapes we watched so much they'd start shedding, leaving those fuzzy tracking lines all over the screen. We were always broke. Me and the guys would scavenge for aluminum cans, mostly Mountain Dew and Dr. Pepper. We'd take them to the grocery store, scan-back machines for 5 cents a pop. It was barely enough for a pack of Twinkies or the latest X-Men comic. Mornings started with The Hunt, checking behind motels and hitting up abandoned parking lots. Sometimes we'd strike gold, like finding copper wiring at a construction site we could scrap. If we were short on cash for a new rental, we'd get desperate and swipe change from Chris's mom's tip jar. We'd catch hell for it later, obviously. But for a new movie, worth it every time. We'd take our haul to Mr. Sullivan at the flea market on the edge of town. It was always a madhouse, people selling knockoff Levi's and sketchy electronics. Mr. Sullivan was this gray-haired guy in his 40s, always wearing a leather vest over a flannel shirt, with a gold tooth and a Marlboro dangling from his lip. He was our main plug. That day, we ran over to trade in a copy of Gremlins for something new. Sullivan flashed that gold tooth and nodded toward a gym bag under the counter. "Yo, check it out, boys. Just got these in. Dig through there, you're bound to find something." We dove into that bag like it was a treasure chest. Action movies, thrillers. "Whoa, check this out," Chris said, letting out a low whistle. He was holding a tape. No cover, no title, just a crude skull painted in red directly onto the black plastic. It looked rough, but that just made it more intriguing. The tape seemed to whisper that whatever was on it would scare the living hell out of you. "Oh, that," Sullivan said, taking it from Chris and turning it over. "I don't know, boys. You might be a little young for this one. This ain't Freddy Krueger. No telling what's on here. Let me watch it first. Then I'll decide if I'm selling it." "Cool?" "Man, we aren't kids," Chris shot back. "Chris, drop it," I hissed, "or we're gonna walk away with nothing." I looked at Sullivan. "All right, Mr. Sullivan. Next time." We kept digging, but everything else looked lame. We ended up settling on Bloodsport with Van Damme. We tossed it on top of Gremlins, which we'd been hyped about only yesterday. Once we said our goodbyes and cleared the stall, Chris stopped dead. He looked at me, dead serious, and whispered, "Don't look back, don't run." I didn't get what was up until he flashed a sly grin and pulled that skull tape out of his jacket pocket. "Did you seriously boost that?" I nearly choked. "Yup," Chris said, puffing out his chest. "Now we've got a real late-night show." We booked it home, dying to see what was on that tape. Chris's mom was on the graveyard shift, so we always saved the scariest stuff for after dark. I'll never forget lying there on the carpet, mesmerized by the glow of the tube. Back then, it felt like we'd never grow up, like there was nothing more important than horror movies and our friendship. Man, was I wrong. But that night, the world felt endless and full of adventure. When the sun went down, we popped the tape in. The old VCR groaned like it didn't have the stomach for it. The screen flickered. Then nothing. I was worried the film was trashed, but then an image flickered to life. It was rough, though. Heavy static, white lines dancing across the screen, and a low, constant hiss for audio. The silence of the empty house only made it creepier. The picture was jumpy. At first, you couldn't tell what you were looking at, but then it came into focus. A dilapidated building. Gray concrete walls, maybe an old lumber mill or a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was clearly filmed on a handheld camcorder. The frame shook, the angles constantly shifting. "This is garbage," Chris muttered, but I just shook my head. Something about it kept me locked in. The camera moved forward through empty hallways, the beam of a flashlight catching peeling paint. The sound got sharper, a sort of guttural, rhythmic whispering. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hall swung open on its own. I swear, no one touched it. My hair stood on end. "What the hell?" Chris whispered. My gut was screaming at me to turn it off, but I couldn't look away. Behind the door was absolute pitch black. The whispering got louder, more sinister. It was in some language that made my skin crawl. Then, lights started flickering on, one by one, like candles. Soon, we could make out blurry shapes in the dark. They were getting clearer. I wish to God I'd never seen it. There were children on that screen, boys and girls our age. I counted at least a dozen. They weren't standing. They were hanging from the ceiling. Plastic tubes ran from their shriveled bodies into the darkness above. The kids were swaying slowly in time with the whispering. But the worst part? Their eyes. They were wide open, frozen in total, primal terror.
"Wait, what? That's Billy. Billy Miller,"
Chris stammered. Everyone in town knew Billy Miller. He'd gone missing 3 weeks ago. The papers said his door was locked from the inside, and all the cops found was a mess of furniture and a TV left on. Our Sony kept playing The Nightmare. Chris pointed at the screen. It really was Billy. He looked like he'd been drained of his very soul. He was still wearing that blue Cleveland Indians shirt. A dark fluid was slowly pulsing through the tube connected to him. Suddenly, the frame jerked again, and something moved in the back of the room. The whispering became deafening. You could hear a heavy, wet breathing sound. The camera started shaking violently. The hanging bodies began to twitch and convulse, their eyes rolling back. Then, I saw them. 2 glowing eyes, yellow, shot through with red veins, and each one had 2 dull pupils. A black figure rose from the shadows. It didn't look human, didn't look like an animal, just a formless, pitch-black void. It didn't walk. It glided, smooth and silent. Its breath was a raspy wheeze. The image on the screen began to tear apart with static.
Turn it off,
Chris screamed, lunging off the couch. But I was frozen. Those yellow eyes on the screen scanned the room, sliced right through me, and stopped. The whispering filled the whole house. I realized right then it had found us. It was looking at us through the screen. The figure lunged at the camera. It was right there. Those bloodshot eyes filled the entire frame, and then everything went black. The next second, I saw Chris. He'd ripped the power cord right out of the wall. I felt a wave of relief so hard, it made me dizzy.
What was that? What the hell was that?
Chris was hyperventilating, staring at the dead screen. We decided we'd take the tape to the sheriff in the morning. Billy and I played Little League together, Chris said, his voice hollow. Maybe there's still time. I hit the eject button, but the tape was jammed. The mechanism just groaned helplessly. Oh, screw this, Chris cursed. Whatever. We'll take the VCR apart tomorrow. Let's just try to sleep. Sleep didn't happen. I woke up to the sound of tape rolling. That same mechanical whir. I thought it was just a glitch, but then I heard it. The whispering. Right behind our heads. I opened my eyes. The TV had turned itself on. Even though the plug was sitting on the floor. The screen was back, but now it was showing our street. Oak Street. The camera was moving slowly past the houses, past the manicured lawns. It turned toward the house with the bright yellow mailbox. Chris's house.
Chris, look.
I shoved my friend. The camera was already at our front door. The whispering was unbearable now, vibrating in my bones. I scrambled to the window and looked outside. Empty. Not a soul on the street. On the screen, the camera was inside now. It glided through the living room, up the stairs. It was right outside the bedroom door.
We gotta stop this.
I lunged for the VCR, but it was running without power. The whispering became physical, like a cold breath on the back of my neck. That's when the knocking started. Light. Calculated. We couldn't move. We were paralyzed. The TV screen went black, and then those eyes were back. Massive, yellow, burning right through us. Everything in the room started flipping over. The lamps shattered, and magazines swirled in a vortex. Those yellow eyes were sucking the soul right out of me. Chris bolted for the door, but something grabbed him. Invisible tentacles dragged him back, straight toward the TV. Chris fought. He screamed. He clawed at the carpet, but he was being sucked into the screen. I watched his legs, his waist, his chest vanish into the glass of the tube. "Chris!" I screamed, grabbing his hand, trying to pull him back. But the force was supernatural. In a blind panic, I grabbed a heavy bronze statue from the dresser and smashed it into the VCR with everything I had. Once, twice, 3 times, I pulverized the casing. It was too late. Chris was gone. His scream is still echoing in the back of my head. The tape was lying there among the wreckage. I grabbed it and started stomping, ripping the black film out with my bare hands, until there was nothing left but shredded plastic. I sat there in the ruins, unable to process what had just happened. My best friend was gone. The 13th disappearance of that summer. Since then, I stay away from screens. No TV, no computer in my house. People think I'm just a local kook, but I know the truth. It can come back. It's waiting behind every dark monitor, ready to open those hideous yellow eyes again.